Cultures of open, wait a minute, did I get it right?
Cultures and diversity, yeah. Cultures of open source software.
I've memorized it for about 10 seconds. Cultures of open source software, welcome.
Hi everyone, my name is Brian Nunez. I work with the Guardian project, and I'm moderating this little discussion that we're having about diversity in FLOSS projects. The two panelists are Dow from Greenhost, who you might be familiar with that organization. We also have Sandy Ordonez, who works with OpenITP, and she runs the community outreach efforts there. So that's it. We'll keep it short, and hopefully we'll have lots of time for discussion. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. So, I said in the introduction, my name is Dow Schmid. I work for Greenhost. I do a lot of different projects. And I'm from Amsterdam, and I got a lot of background in the Dutch hacker culture. And today we're going to talk about diversity, issues around that. And so most of my cues, most of the stuff I know are from that background. So if something is unfamiliar or foreign, it is foreign. So where are we? Like yesterday we saw Mr. Snowden talk again, and we kind of have to ask ourselves what to make all of this. Like, how does it inflict on us, on our lives? And Snowden was pretty clear yesterday in his talk once again, saying, okay, we're all being recorded, all of us. So we're pretty much fucked. And I mean that in a big way. And I mean it also in a special way for you guys here. We, like the tech-savvy people, I think we are a little bit more fucked than the rest of the world. Like us guys, you know, who, I don't know, eat Python for breakfast, you know, guys and girls who can hack their way out of a vault buried 4 miles deep in the desert of Utah. We got like a big responsibility and down upon ourselves. Not only we have to save ourselves, but we also got a responsibility to save everybody else. You know, like the guy who makes a pizza, our doctors, our mom. All these people are looking at us and saying, we need you to engineer our way out of this mess. We have to save them, basically, to save ourselves. So I try to do a little bit of that. Like I give a lot of crypto parties, like in the Amsterdam Public Library. I try to stay on top of the latest news. I read my LibTech, never posted to it though. It's a little bit scary, that list. I go to European hacker camps. I just started my own Tor relay, on my Raspberry Pi, but I can't hack my way even out of a paper bag. And a year after Snowden, I am more and more unsure if any of this stuff makes any sense at all. If I look at the amount of hoops and loops I have to jump through to notch up my security just even a little bit, I really wonder, like, how are my mom, my doctor, and my favorite pizza baker ever going to do this? How are they going to pull it together? How are they going to defend themselves from the class of mass surveillance? And I know some of you have answers, like many of you have many answers actually. And sadly they involve like a great deal of the same abbreviation lingo that we know from the leaks. You know, you have people saying we just have to OTR over TLS using PFS and use Tor to exchange our PGP. Right? Wrong. Oh no, okay, that's right. We have to do that shit. I love it. You know, that's great. That's literally what we have to do. But it's not enough for us. We have to OTR over TLS with PFS to order pizza. We have to use Tor to order our medicine. And we for sure, like hell, have to use PGP to communicate with our mom. We have to get these tools to them to make sure that we can be safe. If they're not going to use it, we're going to stand out like a sore thumb because we're the only ones like having our security to like a good level, a decent level. So what this talks about is that we need to diversify. If we're going to save ourselves, we need to have diversity in our community. because we have to make tools, we have to make sure the tools we make can be used by our bakers, doctors, and moms. So could it be that most of the tools we make are not being used by them because we design them for ourselves and for our close friends? Like, when was the last time you ask your little brother to run your code? When you ask your grandmother to fire up the program that you just made? Like, when was the last time for everybody who's running his own mail server, like, when was the last time you logged in through the webmail interface that 80% of your users are using? So we need user-led design, in my belief. The ones who are going to use the programs must be part of the design and the development process from the start. We need to know who these people are who are going to use our code to save lives on the other side of the earth. Many of us don't have the research budgets of Google or the Facebooks to get an exact profile of the whims and wishes of our users, so we have to meet them face to face. We have to meet with them to learn what they need, and we need to be part of their struggles and know their stories. So we need to diversify. Also because there's not one solution. There are people who say we need technical solutions. There are people who say we need political solutions. And just making a new app with extra crypto won't solve anything if your politics is down the drain. But only political solutions won't work either. Eleanor Saida very rightly pointed out in her talk at the Noisy Square at Ohm Hacker Camp last year. I don't know how many people were there. I know quite a few. But what she said is that basically when a policy is in place on a political level, it doesn't disappear anymore. She memorized one occasion, and I quote her on it. She said, the NSA did very politely in 1975 turn off their Telegram surveillance program. It had never in their entire history produced anything useful, so that's our one example of a technological capability being rolled back. So much for history. Furthermore, you have an additional problem here. And once again, this is a straight quote from Ella. She says, the NSA taps every politician's email, and even anybody who might become a politician. They tap their phones, they tap their email. Partially, they do this for national security reasons. They need to know if these people have sold out to somebody or any number of justifications. But it also means that they have all the dirt on you, on all the politicians. Now, how easy do you think it is to keep a politician bought if their career can be destroyed at any moment? How well do you think their long-term policy is going to be when they know that if they stand up to you too much, they get destroyed? So we need to diversify to fight a political battle internationally. And I'm sorry to say, but I have more faith at this moment in Germany, Poland, the Netherlands, and maybe even Brazil in this regard than the US. But we need the help of you to keep our governments in check. We need to keep our politicians in check, so also you have a safe place to hide. We need international coalitions and show the US through international pressure that they are backwards in destroying not only businesses, but freedom at large. We need diversity. Because many of us are basically circle jerking in an echo chamber. And sorry to be personal, but this is a shout out to Moxie Marlinspike, who's making great stuff like ChatSecure and Redphone. But 2 weeks ago, he found it necessary to call out on Twitter and asking people not to fund CryptoCat for Android, but instead fund his project. And Moxie's work is great, and I understand he believes it is the best thing around. He might even be right at that. But to think that it's good to have just one crypto app and not multiple is beyond me. Anyone with some basic understanding of biology knows what monoculture can mean in a time of crisis. We need many different tools aimed at many different people. We need to make sure not everybody dies when one heart bleeds. So we need diversity because we're going to die, and I mean that literally. We need coders doing journalism, we need journalists coding, we need activists, doctors, lawyers, teachers, civil surgeons, and even the prawn business understanding their jobs will become impossible without security and privacy. I also don't see those as opposing things, but many people would like to frame it, but you can't have privacy without security and the other way around. We're going to be targeted and hunted and smoked out of our man caves. Like XKCD says, we're going to be drugged and beaten with a $5 crank and the 4096-bit RSA encryption will not stand up for us. So we need to diversify and open up our communities to LGBT community, the Syrian fighters, artists, academics, and Mexicans trying to defend themselves against the drug cartels. We need to understand their struggles to empower them. And they are ready. They want to. There was a recent call for academic papers to mathematicians and the NSA on the subject of the NSA, and it resulted in submissions carrying titles like "Mathematicians should sever ties with the NSA," and "Their NSA, long-term security depends on freedom," and "The NSA backdoor to NIST." And this year, every major art academy in the Netherlands has students graduating with artworks dealing with privacy, surveillance, and technology. Syrians fighting both ISIS and Assad want and need their mesh networks. And pizza bakers want to know how to have a Tor hidden service, delivery service accepting Bitcoin. They are ready to make our knowledge and craftsmanship global. And now it's our task to be ready and make sure we can welcome all their ideas, cultures, and insights with open arms. Thank you.
So I'm a little nervous, and when I get nervous, I speak Spanglish, so I apologize in advance. I'm going to talk a little bit about what it feels like being a bicultural person working in open source and some of the things that I've seen. I'm going to throw a whole bunch of information at you, and part of it is just to trigger some thoughts and comments and questions later on. In these conversations, what I find really interesting is that a lot of times the conversation you have with people that are affected, right? And there's people that, you know, maybe you're a white guy with a computer degree, and you think, well, it doesn't affect me. Like, I care about this, but it doesn't affect me, so I don't know how to help. Well, I'm here to tell you that we actually need your help. For cultural change to happen, it has to be a priority for the tribe. And diversity is actually really important, like Dow shared, but also because diversity makes things more fun, it makes things more interesting. We're also going to produce better products and services, and it's really the right thing to do. This is actually a cartoon where a guy breaks into another guy's room and is like, "You're the reason that there's no nerdy girls here, man. Like, stop," you know? So we need your help, and it has to come from the community and not just like, you know, the few people that are affected. So when I talk about culture, I really like to give people a little bit of my background just so that you guys understand what my preferences are, you know, what my biases may be. I'm a native New Yorker. I grew up in the Bronx and Yonkers. Any native New Yorkers in here? Yay! What's up? I'm a Latina. My parents are immigrants from Cuba and Spain. I also say I'm a baptized Dominican. I grew up working in a butcher shop in Washington Heights. It's in North Manhattan. I love goddess stuff, like I have goddess imagery everywhere. In regards to race, I come from a multiracial family from my Cuban side, and then I married a Chicano. And in terms of open source, Wikipedia was my gateway drug into open source, so that's eventually how I got here. As a bicultural person, I think of culture very much like, kind of like tech, right? The body's the hardware, and the culture is the program. And you can have various programs in you, right? So it could be your nationality, it could be your race, sexual orientation. And just like a program, culture can be patched, it can be updated, or it can be completely deleted, right? And I think that that's something really, really important to like keep in mind, right? Culture's not stagnant, it actually evolves. And you can evolve your own culture. The good news is that everybody in this room is a kaleidoscope of cultures. And floss is also a kaleidoscope of cultures. The bad news is you're probably not aware of how your cultural program affects you. Most people that are aware because they have 2 competing or 3 competing programs in them that want to compete for your brain, and they're opposing, right? So, for example, a bicultural kid is constantly thinking, well, this side tells me to do this side tells me to do this, and I don't know, right? And the thing with open source projects is that a lot of times we're not aware of our culture, right? We're not really taking a step back and looking at who's there, what are the culture clashes that are taking place, just being a little bit more conscientious of that, right? And it's also really important to understand that just because you have a diversity, like you have a diverse room, it doesn't mean that it's diversity friendly, right? A diversity friendly space has several characteristics to make it welcoming and open to everyone. These are just some facts and figures. I tried to look around for stuff, things that I come across. I by no means am a researcher, so these are things that I found that were like interesting. There is a 2012 study of 170,000 open source projects shared on SourceForge, and they found that the largest contributors came from Europe and the United States. Depending on the studies that you read, women make up anywhere from 1.5 to 3% of the FOSS community. Obviously, some projects have a higher percentage than others. I cite the Wikipedia editors just because like Wikipedia is a project that you probably don't need that much tech because you're editing the articles, right? But at the same time, it's only 8.5%, so there's a really huge gender gap. And they did a study not too long ago that I'm sure you guys all read, or at least saw in the news, where the typical volunteer, they found out that the typical volunteer is white male, 30 years old, from Europe and the United States. In terms of percentage of people of color in open source, I actually couldn't find any study or research. If you guys do know of any, please just let me know. What I did find though was just studies of technology in general. 3% here in the United States, 3% of the computing workforce are black women, 2% are Latinas, 5% are Asian women. A recent report from Mercury News said that basically the disparity in Silicon Valley is getting worse for minorities, which is really surprising because you would think it would actually get better now, right? And then also one thing that I've noticed about open source that you guys all know, it's obviously very English dominant, and because of that, like that usually means, and you're also tech dominant, so that means you usually have enough money to buy at least like a laptop, right? So there's definitely a lack of socioeconomic diversity. One of the things that I did for this presentation was I went to Spanish-speaking open source communities and I asked them, well, what are some of the issues that you guys have, right? So this is some of the feedback I got back. Everything is done in English, not always, but generally everything is first created in English and then translated, right? So a lot of them feel that they're not actually part of the creative process. And in many ways, there's this almost like this thing in the back of the head that some of them feel that they have to ask for permission to do things or to join, right? It's also hard to participate if you don't know the language well. Also, English speakers are more seen and celebrated. So like if you have a Spanish speaker or any other language that is actually really, really good at what they do, but they don't speak English, they may not be like asked to be on panels. I mean, maybe in their particular country, but like in the general international tech community, like they may not come to like a panel or be speakers, be on an expert list. Also, some of them felt that the Anglo or Western way is always considered to be the correct way, right? This inability to understand that people do things differently, they process things differently, they collaborate differently, and that's something that a lot of them felt, and it was like actually quite emotional for them. They also feel that at times our community don't necessarily appreciate or take advantage of the fact that there are different mentalities, that there's different ways to view the world, that they're taking into account different things. So it's not just the language barrier, it's actually a cultural clash. And actually, like when you go to a lot of the open source projects, like and you're volunteering in them, you'll see some of these culture clash happen, right? Also, along those lines, decisions are taken from the English point of view. I'll give you a perfect example. There's one particular project that launched a magazine, right? And it was only in English. Finally, they finally got volunteers and they were translating in Spanish, but at the end of the day, the editorial decisions are made in English. They're made by English speakers, right? So this was something that was commented. Also, as you guys all know, decisions are made on specific time zones, so if some, one particular region's asleep, when they wake up, they're like, wait a second, this is not, I'm not cool with this, The next one, I think, affects not just cultures that may be opposed to this, but also personalities, right? There's definitely a level of aggressiveness and competitiveness in open source that you see a lot in mailing lists, right? That it kind of pushes people away, kind of intimidates people from wanting to participate, right? And that's why I always say mailing lists are bad for your health, because I can't tell you how many times I see people emotionally disturbed by this. And then obviously, the way that people see open source really is influenced by your culture. So a few particular people that I was talking to made the distinction that in the US, for example, it might have a more libertarian or more free speech, angle, and in Latin America, it might have a more social justice angle. So yesterday, we did 2 meetups at Noisy Square, and if you guys are around later, please pass by Noisy Square. We would love to have you there. We did one on diversity, and we did a women's group, and this is some of the feedback we got there. We did a little workshop, and this is so the crowd, basically, these are just some of the comments we got. There's no role models, and there's a lack of investment in diversity. So organizers think of diversity as an afterthought. There's no process so that it's an integral part of the process. And if this is going to be a priority, we really have to be conscious of diversity from the very beginning of anything that you're organizing, right? Also, they feel like a lot of people may not see the value in diversity. Why is this important? Also, even though open source is very international, it kind of has a monoculture, right? More than likely, you're here because there's a common things that bring you together, and that's great. But at the same time, it would be cool to bring in different people that have different skills and different mindsets. Lack of community spaces, safe spaces where people can have these conversations. Because this is the thing about diversity and wanting to increase more people, you actually have to have a space, right? Here in New York, it's a very international city, and the one thing that I love about native New Yorkers is that we talk about these issues directly out in the open, and sometimes those conversations can be really uncomfortable, but that's how you change things, right? And the thing is, a lot of people with culture, talking about culture, race, they feel uncomfortable talking about it. But I think everybody has to individually kind of overcome that, and as organizers, when we're doing things, provide a safe space where these conversations can take place. Anyway, I want to leave some time for questions, so I'm just going to go on to the next slide. This is some things, these are possible solutions that I'm going to throw at you, or some possible, just some comments. Like I mentioned before, usually only the people that are affected are talking about these issues, so it'd be cool to have more people thinking about this, because again, it should be a collective group thing that we're addressing. Keep in mind that aesthetics, preferences, and dislikes are determined by background, right? So that's actually why I did this whole thing in rainbows and colors to make a point, because that's my preference, right? And I know lots of people that like that, right? So when you're doing outreach material, just remember, if you're outreaching to a different community, it may not be you, so figure out what they like and present that information in their preferences, right? So, because that reduces also communication barriers, right? Don't make assumptions, ask a lot of questions. We all give meaning to things, right? The way that I see my phone, I ascribe a certain meaning to this that might be different than the way Brian does, right? So a lot of times, there's a lot of things that are unsaid. So don't assume things about people, ask a lot of questions. I don't understand why you did that. Well, what do you mean by this? And that's the problem with these things with cross-cultural communication, that it actually requires a lot of effort to kind of reduce those barriers. Community management is the most essential thing. Definitely have people, empower a committee or a group of people that can provide the community with help. They can shepherd, they can figure out, if there's bad behavior, they can call it out, or just remind people, look, this is the guidelines. When possible, provide some childcare. Like that's, we don't want to exclude parents. And, a lot of us have kids or will have kids. Also, inviting people is enough. Like, don't just expect people to come here. Like, go to them. Like, go to the communities. Like, go where they are, right? Like, there's a group called Latism, Latinos in Social Media. And, like, one of the things that I do is I go to their events and I try and talk to people that are part, like, big tribal leaders or whatever and talk to them about open source and explain why US Latinos would want to get involved in this, right? So even if you're not part of that community, like go to them and invite them in. Like I mentioned before, at events, make sure to create a safe space. Also openly discuss failures, and this actually came from yesterday. This is why I think that was like one of the best points that came out of yesterday's conversation. Like that, talk about it, just talk about it honestly. Well, dude, we only had like 5% women. What happened? Like, let's fix this. Recruit people good at cross-cultural communications. Bicultural people, bilingual people, they're really awesome as human bridges. Like, I can't even tell you, like, every single time that I've participated in an open source project, usually the people that are best at solving these issues just by default, not even because they're thinking about it, are people that, like I said, bilingual, bicultural. Also, be very sensitive. Like, remember that discrimination can produce PTSD. Like, I know lots of people that have experienced really bad things in their lives because of discrimination. So people, it's an emotional thing, so be conscientious of that, And then the last thing, this stuff is hard. Like when you have cultural clashes, and I know from firsthand experience, it's almost like a violent thing, right? Because it's internal. It like pushes your mind, your boundaries, how you see the world, and it can be a very violent thing, right? And it's definitely a hard thing. So, be compassionate with yourself, be compassionate with others, and definitely have patience, because if we work at this together, we can solve it. Like, this is not hard, right? Like, when you go to private organizations, like, corporations, they actually have higher percentage of diversity than open source, but that's because they have people dedicated to this stuff, right? They have HR people. So just focus, ooh, sorry. It's okay, that was the last slide. Just be patient and understand that this is something that we can solve if we work at it together. So.
Thanks to both of the speakers. In preparation for this talk, we met a few times talking about the topic in general. I think one of the things that struck me was a quote that you, Sandy, told me, the Maya Angelou.
Yep.
Can you?
Yeah, so Maya Angelou, I'm probably going to mess it up, but it's when somebody tells you who they are, believe them, right? So in the same way, when a minority tells you what they're experiencing, believe them. Like, pay attention to it. Don't be like, you're wrong. Like, try and understand why they're experiencing this, why they think it's a problem, what are the things that they're seeing that is a problem, and try to help.
Right. Yeah, I think it's indicative of the diversity of the range of different styles. Like we had on the one hand, we had Dao with his very minimalist, no slides presentation, and then we had a very colorful presentation on the other side. Another thing that I thought was interesting in our conversations was this idea that floss has as one of its founding ideas is this idea of openness, right? So by extension, people assume that there's inclusivity. Dao, you talked to me about having hacker spaces where people come in and they want to participate, but then they don't really know how to get involved. You know that?
Yeah, I know what you're getting at. So I think there's quite a good culture on paper in Floss and also in hackerspaces. Again, talking from a Europe perspective here because I don't have any experience here in hackerspaces. But there's a very general understanding that hackerspaces should be public spaces, that open source software should be able for anyone to enter into and participate in. However, the ideologies behind it are hard to enforce sometimes in real life. when you find that you found a space and you're hanging out there with your friends and somebody might be walking in with a computer problem, they really might be interested in learning something about Linux or something. They're a first-time Ubuntu user. And then the guys hanging out there drinking club mate are not necessarily feeling like they're your help desk. And saying, sorry, we don't have time for it. We're now repairing our, I don't know, electronic soccer machine, and that's far more important at this moment. Actually, they're right. They're not a help desk. And you shouldn't look at these people like your go-to help desk. But that was one point at which you basically lost a new member and maybe a good member of your society, which also could have taught you something, because the very first thing that happened was bad. So something that happens a lot in makerspaces, they tend to diverge after an initial good setup into very exclusive environments where only the in crowd is welcome. And yeah, I think that applies to more.
Yeah, I think it also speaks to this idea that that monoculture is in general bad. I mean, not just from a cultural perspective, but if you look at biodiversity, it's a sort of a biological imperative that the more diversity you have, the greater chance we have to survive. I think maybe what you're getting at is this idea that you're missing out on opportunities when you when you close down the avenues for people to participate. You're sort of missing on maybe the next Aaron Schwartz could have been that kid who you didn't want to get up and show how to.
Maybe also what I said in my talk, it's hard to know what end users really experience, what kind of problems they walk against. And most of us are so tech savvy that we learned ourselves that shit like 10 years ago. But it can be very enlightening to see the struggles that people have sometimes in that regard. And not only talking about problems, but also talking about solutions. Having a clear structure in your space or in your community helps a lot. So say you have your makerspace and you don't want to be a help desk, but you want to have like a safe time for people to enter, just then decide that there's going to be like 1 hour a week where you can just sit there and people know that they can come there and they know kind of what to expect. Because the culture of openness and sharing and everybody equal also implies a lot of non-structurelessness, and it makes it opaque for people to enter into the community, like what to expect and what's come at what time and who can I actually tap on their shoulder if I have a problem, because they're all just with their hoodie on sitting behind a computer.
And Sandy, you talked a little bit about the difference between European and Latin American culture in terms of the participation. Could you talk a little bit more about, what efforts are being done, or if any, to try and sort of bring the two sides, make them a little bit more collaborative?
Well, I mean, I think, for me, one of the things like at my organization that we're doing is we're organizing a festival, and I'm trying to do it, we're as a group, we're trying to do it in Spain just to have it at a Spanish-speaking country. And I think that that's actually part of the problem, right? Like, I think part of the problem is that we need to find the community and go to them. And, like, I know, like, I'm really active, I was really active in Joomla. I'm not as active as I used to be before, but one of the things that I saw that was really, really essential and important was when I first got there, there was like very few like groups, like, kind of virtual spaces for the Spanish-speaking community. And little by little, they started to create these like huge virtual spaces in Spanish. And that was really, really powerful, because at the end of the day, that particular sub-community could empower themselves, could ask questions, could rely on each other. So I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but I think that's really important, helping the subcultures like kind of come together and empower themselves.
Right. So in the interest of cultural diversity, we want to open it up to questions, comments, and complaints. There's a microphone in the middle of the room.
So yeah, if anything struck a chord with you or you got additions to make, feel free to walk up in the middle, and I think somebody actually already is. No. So I'll continue then.
I think we have one.
Hi. So I guess a quick comment and then a question. I like the metaphor of biology and evolution, and it comes up a lot in these sorts of discussions. And I think people don't take it quite far enough, because you see so sex is a great way to increase diversity, and even asexual bacteria come up with ways of passing genes between them because it is the most effective way to spread ideas, to spread data. And so this sort of diversity, I think, people don't take the metaphor quite far enough, I think. So I thought that was interesting. And the other thing is, there was a certain amount of talk recently about Stack Exchange opening Stack Overflow in Portuguese, and Joel Spolsky has written stuff about how he really thinks that all programmers should be writing in English, but there's this huge community, and he sort of recognizes that there's a need for this. And you mentioned language a bit, and I was wondering if you had any more